Okay, everyone. So we have Cynthia Hinojosa, who's going to be discussing the permanency care, and she's also the adoption negotiator for DFPS. I'm going to go ahead and have her kind of introduce herself, and then I'll start sharing my screen, so that way she can kind of go off of that. And if you are here, I'm going to submit your training for you. If you're watching this pre-recorded, then you can always just email me, call the office, and let me know that you have watched the training. So Cynthia, if you want to go ahead and get started, and I'll start sharing my screen.
Okay, great. I'm Cynthia Hinojosa with Child Protective Services, and I'm officed in the Rio Grande Valley, but I cover Region 11, which is 19 counties down here in from, let's see, Corpus to Laredo, or no, further up Corpus to Laredo to Brownsville. So the official title, yes, is the Permanency Care and Adoption Assistance Negotiator. The negotiator title is the one that when staff are talking to families, they let them know. Most of the time they'll just say, you're going to get a call from a negotiator. So they're kind of in a panic when they hear that word. But the reason that they use that is because in order for children to receive benefits, or the families to receive benefits for the children, we have basically two amounts that we can go by. But we start from 0 up to the maximum amount that's allowed, depending on the children's level of care. So that's why they call it a negotiation, because in talking to the families and reviewing the paperwork that they submit, they're documenting what amounts they feel they need to help in raising that child, or help, financially. So the pamphlet that you're looking at, there's 2 pages, page 1 and 2. It really kind of starts on page 2 when you get the actual pamphlet and it's folded. This is the last one that I have, and this was back from October of 2010. There's only one little, I'm sorry? Hello?
I think it was just somebody's like feedback, like they were putting themselves on mute.
Okay, no problem. So there was only one change that I saw on here as far as an amount, but other than that, the pamphlet is pretty, gives out information when a child comes into care. Of course, the decision or the conservatorship unit, the legal unit, when the child is in our custody, they are trying to work with the family to reunify the children, but there are times when they can't, so they're looking for permanent placement for them, and that can either be with relatives or fictive kin under the Permanency Care Assistance Program, or then, of course, if they get adopted, they can be adopted by anyone, of course, that meets the requirement. So when they give out this paperwork to them, they may be going towards reunification and then working towards permanency care assistance at the same time. And the benefits, I just deal with the benefits. I don't deal with whether or not this case is going to if it's going to go into adoption. I don't make those decisions. So when it comes to me, it's just for the financial assistance and the benefits for the family. So if you ever have a question as to why they're going towards PMC versus PMC with PCA, which is Permanency Care Assistance, or if they're going towards adoption, that would be questions that you would have for the conservatorship workers and supervisors. So when I get the paperwork, what I'm looking for, of course, is in permanency care assistance, it is the family that has to meet the qualifications. And so what they have had to do, they are either relative or kinship that have been licensed as a foster parent to care for that child, and they have to have met 6 months requirement of caring for them, but as a foster placement, because they can be placed in their home, maybe a month into coming into foster care, but they are going through the kinship program, and then they have to become licensed. So that gets very confusing for families when they say, oh, well, I've already had them for 2 years, but they may not have been fostering them for the entire 6 months requirement yet. And so that's one of the number one things that they have to meet is that they have been fostering them for 6 months or more. The other thing is that reunification and adoption have to be ruled out in order for them to qualify for this program. And then, so like I said, in this particular permanency care assistant, it's the family that has to meet the requirements. And then with adoption assistance, it is the child that needs to meet the requirements. So that I'll look at that. When we look at that last handout, I'll discuss there as far as what the difference is. But if you get asked that question, a lot of times it's going to be because, will the child qualify for benefits under one program or the other? That's sometimes what they're looking at. And so the benefits for both programs is they can qualify for monthly financial assistance until the child turns 18. There is what we call extended benefits, and that can be for children to qualify to receive benefits until they're 21. But that is if they are either adopted or permanency care assistance is granted at age 16 or older. So that monthly financial assistance can go from after the age of 18 to 21 if they meet certain requirements, meaning at 18, 19, and 20, we send them a recertification to find out, is the child still enrolled in school? If they're not in school, are they still working, or at least working part-time? And then if not, if they have some sort of disability or something that doesn't allow them to work or go to school, then they provide documentation from doctors stating why they can't do either. So just to give you an idea, the families can receive benefits for them up to the age of 18. But then we have, if they are 16 or older when permanency care or adoption is done, then they can receive it until they're 21.
Cynthia, I have a question. As far as, so you're saying that they're able to receive this monthly adoption assistant payment, right? So let's just say that somebody, everybody, they qualify, and let's just say the child's 6 years old. Is there anything from the time they're 6 to 18 that you do like yearly where you have to still ensure that they're qualified to still have that assistance?
No, well, we send out like for if they're not 16, okay, let me go back. So if they're 16 or older, we send out a yearly recertification. If they qualified before age 16, like you mentioned, a 6-year-old, then we send out a recertification every 5 years.
5 years.
So,
okay.
Yeah. And so, yes, sometimes we find out at that 5-year mark that the child left a year prior. Families can be responsible for paying back if they were receiving monies and the child was no longer in their home. We don't get them that often, but there are a few that the child has left the home and they didn't report it. But when they get their agreement, they get a list of, things that they need to report, any changes, so that we can determine if they continue to qualify. But if everything stays the same, the child is there, that benefit they get, even like a 2-year-old that gets the benefit, it just goes automatic until they turn 18.
Okay, thank you.
And so the monthly financial assistance is the one, and then they also receive Medicaid through us automatically. they will get that as well until they're 18 or until they're 21 if they meet the other requirements. For the Medicaid, sometimes there is that transition time from the foster care Medicaid to the permanency care or adoption Medicaid. So we get a lot of calls back during that transition time because it takes a little bit for the foster care Medicaid to end in the system through the Health and Human Services, and then to pick up our adoption or permanency care Medicaid. So we do have a lot of calls back during that time, you know, just trying to figure out, are they covered, are they not covered? And they're covered every single day. There is no gap in coverage at all. It's just the transition from one to the other sometimes makes it seem like they don't have Medicaid, or like they call or go to the doctor's office right during the transition and they'll say, oh, they don't have it. So we do get a lot of panic calls. But that's just in the system in the background doing that. And then they also receive their college tuition and fee waiver. So they will have their college tuition and fees paid for as long as they attend a school in Texas and as long as it's public, not private. But for the college tuition assistance, that as of September 1st, 2009, any child that was adopted, like even if they didn't qualify for the adoption subsidy, and then if you have a case where they got PMC without the permanency care assistance, they qualify to receive that college tuition. So it's basically any child that, how would I say, any child that was adopted or permanent managing conservatorship was done after September 1st, 2009. And so that's, you know, quite a long time already. So, and for those children that qualify without any of our monthly financial assistance and Medicaid benefits, they have to enroll or take a class for college before they turn 25. But in the other case, those that are getting adoption assistance, they don't have a time limit. So we get a lot of questions about that too, because I think it's a blank statement that's shared out there saying, oh, they have to, some things they have to finish college by 25, but they just actually have to start and utilize that college letter before they turn 25. So that's real important. And then on that pamphlet, you'll see that they talk about PMC with termination of parental rights or without termination of parental rights. Again, that depends on how the case went, whether or not they got termination or, and whether or not the families will still be involved. In these type of cases where they have permanent managing conservatorship, there have been a few, I've had a few, and I've been doing this for 12, 13 years already, where the parents have gone back later on to court and petitioned to get their child back, and they've actually been returned to them. And at that point, we stop the benefits to the caregiver because the child has returned to their parent. So we can never say never that it doesn't happen, because it has happened. On the other part of it, there is another benefit, which is what we call non-recurring expenses, and that's the expense for the attorney fees. That was the only change that is on this form. It had $1,500, but back in 2012, that changed to $1,200. So we rarely see it with permanency care, but there are times that you might have a family who hired an attorney to intervene on their behalf in a PMC case, and so they can get reimbursed up to $1,200 for those attorney fees. But in adoption, of course, they do hire an attorney to finalize the adoption. And so it's $1,200 per child. So let's say they adopt a sibling group of 3, then they can get reimbursed up to $3,600 for attorney fees. And we have a lot of attorneys out there that will do, they'll bill the state directly, so sometimes families might not have any out-of-pocket expense for that. So for, like I said, for the monthly financial assistance, the Medicaid, the college tuition assistance, and the attorney fee reimbursement, those programs, those benefits are for both adoption and permanency care assistance. And then we have in our region, which is Region 11, and Region 6, which is Houston, they have what they call post-permanency services, and we have post-adoption services. So that's an agency that's called Arms Wide Adoption Services. They provide ongoing support to the families. If the family is willing to, they can enroll after CPS closes the case, and so they're available to provide, you know, case management. They are a resource to them to hook up for like counseling or therapy. Sometimes some of the kids need residential treatment, and they'll help navigate with that. So the benefit of that, of course, is that once CPS closes the case, sometimes the families feel like they're out there on their own, but they still have a support system in place. Because of course, what we're trying to do is keep that placement intact, and so they have that benefit until they turn 18. And then the last benefit, but that comes under adoption assistance, is there is an adoption tax credit with the IRS that they can look to see if they qualify for that. But like I said, basically the benefits for both are the same all the way across except for that adoption tax credit. And then one of the big questions that we get is the amount, because under permanency care assistance, during the time that they are fostering the children, they are getting a daily rate based on the current foster care rate. And so that's a significant amount compared to the final benefit under the permanency care assistance and adoption assistance program. So it's on the second handout, the Fostering Connections one, that the maximum amount that they can receive monthly financial assistance is either $400 a month per child or up to $545, depending on the child's service level. So when they've been getting, almost $900 a month per child, and then they talk to me, they get sometimes, they have issues with the fact that they're going to be getting, less than half of what they were used to getting for providing for them. And so the way I explain, of course, is the foster care benefit, that's temporary. This permanency care assistance and adoption assistance, those are long-term benefits. If they put a pencil to it, when they are adopting a 2-year-old child and they get that benefit long-term until they turn 18, it's quite a bit of financial assistance. But that amount is set by the Texas legislature. So I cannot go any beyond that 400 or 545. It's not like that I have any leeway as far as those maximum amounts. So when I'm talking to the families, we're trying to justify, what is it? What kind of needs do you have? What kind of needs does the children have that, you need help in financially providing for them? A lot of times, of course, number one is childcare, and we all know that's super expensive. So $400 a month doesn't even, begin to cover their whole amount of childcare. And then you talk about their, just their basic necessities of food and clothing and putting a roof over their head. So that does get difficult in helping them understand, but it is just an assistance the state is helping them with. So throughout the life of the case, they need to, they should have been or been talked to as far as, the expectation, of course, is that they can provide for the children as well, with their own income. And so I think that you all have already had a presentation as far as, going through the home study, how they qualify for that. And so they talk at length with them about their finances and expenses. And so that they can look at, whether or not they have the ability to meet the children's needs with
So
the little assistance.
I had a question. When they do that home study, right? So they're just looking at their financials at that time. They're not also taking into consideration of the fact that they would be getting PCA payments, right?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. And then of course, over the years lately, especially, we've had a lot of calls because, the legislature hasn't done anything to change that amount. And of course, the cost of living has changed significantly. So, sometimes
Very significant. I'm like, that definitely would, it is crazy how much it has come up. So I'm sure that y'all get a lot of people that are frustrated with that.
Yeah, and because when they're filling out the paperwork, it's of course, they're putting in all their expenses, and so they're realizing, well, how much they're actually spending per month on each child, and it, the amount that we can provide doesn't. And it's like I say, we don't cover dollar for dollar. Mm-hmm. It's just an assistance, and so
right.
The more they can hear that from everybody is helpful.
They'll know. Yeah, they'll be like, we know you're not lying. We know that's what.
Yeah, and on that last handout, with the Texas Administrative Code, because we get the, not every child qualifies for the adoption assistance either, and I'm sure y'all throughout your cases have heard that. And so, I wish I could do something different, but they just have to meet all these requirements. Let me see, did I miss? What kind of questions does anyone have that, maybe in a case that you've worked on, or?
Hi, I'm Akasa. I had a question about, I heard you mention the attorney repayment fee. I'm getting ready for a possible adoption, and I have not ever heard of that.
So if the child qualifies for adoption assistance, then the state will can reimburse the family, or the attorney can bill the state directly for their fees up to $1,200. We don't, it's not, how would I say? Like, it's not going to be, of course, the whole amount. Sometimes attorneys charge more than that. There are quite a few attorneys that work with the state, and they already know that that's the maximum amount, so they work with that. But I've had some where they pay $5,000-6,000, for an adoption, and so
wow.
Sometimes if they can, ask around and see who work with CPS adoptions, then they may be able to get that at little or no cost. Sometimes they charge them for like court costs and filing fees. So I've heard some have had to pay out of pocket maybe $300 to $500, but not anything like $5,000-6,000.
Right. Yes, ma'am. All right. Thank you very much.
So on that last handout, the Texas Administrative Code, I just wanted to point out, because we, with adoption assistance, and like I said earlier, for permanency care assistance, it is the family that has to qualify by meeting all those requirements, versus adoption assistance, it's the child that has to qualify. And what we mean is that a special needs adoption, a child with special needs. And of course, any child that comes into foster care, we want, they come into care for a reason, but again, the legislature has set, how they qualify. So right about in the middle, you'll see where it talks about the time the adoptive placement agreement is signed, the child is less than 18 years old, and they meet at least one of the following conditions. So you'll see where it has the child is at least 6 years old. So if we have any child that is 6 years old or older, a single child, age 6 years or older, they will qualify for adoption assistance. And then the next one is if you have a child that is 2 years old and a member of a racial or ethnic group, then they qualify for adoption assistance. So, if you have a 2-year-old, 3-year-old, 4-year-old, they have to be, of a minority status in order to qualify. And then any children that are adopted together, a sibling group, they will qualify if they're being adopted by the same family. And then, or if you have a child that is joining their siblings, because some families have adopted 2 or 3 children before and another sibling comes into care, then that child will qualify if they're joining their siblings. And that doesn't matter if they're, like a 1-year-old joining their siblings, the age, because they're joining the siblings, then that cancels out the age requirement. And then if they don't qualify under any of those, if you have a child that is receiving SSI, if we've applied for SSI benefits for them, then they would automatically qualify. And then if they're not receiving SSI, but they have a doctor's statement that will list what type of diagnosis they have and that is considered handicapping or disabling, then they can qualify for adoption assistance. And we're not looking at the age. So the lot of questions that you'll get, of course, is, they look at, does a 1.5-year-old Hispanic child qualify for adoption assistance? Well, the answer would be no, because they're under age 2, and unless they have a verifiable physical, mental, or emotional handicapping condition, that a doctor would give a letter stating that. We have a 4-year-old Caucasian child? Would they qualify? Or if they're being adopted by themselves, they're under age 6, they're Caucasian, they would not qualify. So they would have to be age 6 or older. I get a lot of the workers, they'll say, we have a question, we have a 1-year-old set of twins, and they'll ask if they qualify. And so I'll always tell them, well, are the twins siblings? And that, then they kind of realize, oh yeah, well, they're siblings being adopted together. But it's because they get stuck on the age of them being one, and they think that they won't qualify. So, but yeah, we have had quite a few, that do not qualify for the adoption assistance, meaning they won't get the financial assistance, they won't get Medicaid, they won't get help with the attorney fees. So basically, they qualify for the college tuition and fee waiver. Again, as long as it was after September 1st, 2009. So those requirements, a special needs child for adoption, those are the ones that we get. Sometimes the court, the judge wants to put it in the court order that they have to qualify for assistance. In some counties, we've had them hold off on, an order until the child turns 2 so that they can qualify. There's just been different, little things that they try to do in order for them to qualify for adoption assistance, but it doesn't always happen. Questions on that?
I think yeah, I don't see any questions in the chat,
No,
but
but
it's very interesting on the, I think I probably would get confused too, as far as, like you said, they get stuck on
yeah.
the age.
Yeah, and because again, why does it have to be age 2 or older of a minority status? And because, the disproportionality of children
Right.
in that category that remain in foster care longer. Of course, we have a lot of families that would love to adopt a baby. And so it's going to depend. We are supposed to try, or, the workers are supposed to try to place the kids without adoption assistance as much as possible.
Mhm.
And so when you look at if they had a Caucasian child being easier to adopt versus a minority child, that's, I guess, way back when they set up the parameters,
Yeah.
that's what they looked at. And so, yeah, the age range is the thing. But we do have lots of siblings, and so they qualify, lots of sibling groups. I think, the main one, of course, are the children that are underage too, that are just not qualifying.
Yeah.
Now, it doesn't mean they can never qualify, because if later on, they let them know, they can always appeal the case later on if that child develops something, like ADHD, for example, and they have a doctor's statement that will say, they have this diagnosis, it's considered handicapping or disabling, and then they have to put in there that it existed prior to adoption. And so the way they get, they put that is because they'll say the child was too young to be diagnosed at the time. And so, yeah, I've had quite a few appeals that have come through, because once they're in school, that's when they start to see some of those behaviors and things, and the doctors are more willing to, how would I say, like, they're looking for treatments for them, and then they realize, the families realize that they can come back and appeal for benefits at that time. So just as a reminder, the part of the case that I take care of is once they're getting close to providing permanent managing conservatorship, and the family has gone through the Fostering Connections program. Basically, they've been licensed to provide foster care for that child. Then the caseworkers have to reach out to me to start that process of filling out the paperwork. It's very important that they sign these agreements with me prior to the court granting them permanent custody or that adoption being consummated. So that, the information has to be getting out there to the families, of course, especially in the permanent managing conservatorship cases. I think that they may hear different information, and so they're, like I said, sometimes they think the time frame has already been met because they've had the children for so long, but they haven't actually been fostering them for the 6 months. So there are some cases where the judge has, granted that permanent custody, and the time frame hadn't been met yet. But the family, again, I guess when they discuss it, the families are willing to do that because they want to close the case or whatever, it might be. But if you have cases where you think that they qualify for those benefits, then you can give out my information. I can talk to anyone in general terms.
Okay.
But if it's case specific, then I have to refer back to the caseworker, because I might not have any. If I don't have an application in front of me and a whole packet of information, then it's hard for me to discuss that case, because I don't know which way it's going or things like that.
Okay. Yeah. Did anybody have any questions for Cynthia? Yeah. I was very, I have a friend who just recently adopted, he had a casa and everything, and so he just recently adopted, and he did let me know about the adoption, like assistance and things like that. So I was kind of like, but I just didn't know, yeah, like you said, the qualifications for it. And then that was my question, is whether or not they have to recertify. What was the recertify date if they're under the age of 18, as you mentioned?
Yes. So those are recertification. The letter goes out every 5 years. And sometimes people will be like, 5 years. And when they get that letter, sometimes they forget that I told them that, and they'll call and say, why is my case open again? And we're like, it's, we're not taking away the kids or anything. We're just doing this for the financial part of it. And then sometimes, we'll get calls because a new case has come in or things like that. And we have to tell them, the only reason we have your case open is for financial assistance. We're not, like our eligibility specialist, she gets calls all the time. When was the last time you visited with this child? Blah, blah, blah. And she's like, no, I'm not a caseworker. I'm just the financial part of it. So when they get a call in on the hotline, of course, they look up and they'll see an open case. But it's only it's open because we have to keep it open for the benefits part of it.
Benefits part, yeah.
So yeah, it gets confusion here and there on certain things. Yeah, definitely. But again, don't hesitate. You can give out my information. Like I said, I can provide general information. Or if you have, if a question comes up a little bit later that somebody thinks about, you can email me.
Okay, yeah, I'll definitely do that. And I'll share your contact information for anybody who would like to, maybe has a little bit more questions. We do record these, so if any volunteers do watch it, they might want your information. So I'll send it out in an email to all of our volunteers. But I just want to thank you so much I know that when we spoke, you said that you hadn't done a presentation in a while. So thank you so much for putting something together for our volunteers. It was a lot of information. So I just want to thank you again.
Yes, and so we, like I said, the staff, of course, the conservatorship staff, they don't, the permanency care assistance, it doesn't come up as often as we think. So sometimes you might have a staff person who never dealt with one at all. Or they'll say, oh, yeah, I had one of those a few years ago. I don't know what to do. So, I always rely on the supervisors, like, don't let these cases go through without making sure we do what we have to do.
Right.
But, yeah, so they, and then, of course, if you have one that's going to adoption, it gets transferred to a different worker. And so, yeah, families are, having to deal with different people for different, depending on which way yeah. So, and then they get, oh, you're going to get a call from the negotiator. Sometimes I get, when they answer, they're like, we've been waiting for your call forever, and you're the last thing that we need. And they get upset, and I'm like, I'm so sorry, but it's a process. I can't
don't let the title scare you.
Yeah. And until we get all the paperwork in, I can't do anything about it. So. But other than that, like I said, feel free to contact me. Thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you so much, Cynthia. We hope you have a good rest of your day.
You too. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.